Vikings select.
He's a longtime NFL draft expert who's been sweating Vikings football since the Randy Moss era.
Straight cash, homie.
Welcome to Thor Talks Purple.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Thor Talks Purple. On today's episode, it is War Room Wednesday, where every Wednesday we are going to talk about the NFL draft from the perspective of the Minnesota Vikings. I'm here with producer AJ. AJ, we have a lot to get into today, so let's dive right into it.
Yeah, I can't wait. This is going to be such a fun, weekly edition for the show. And we're starting off here with a nice little audit of the Minnesota Vikings. So, Thor, I want to hear from you. When it comes to the cap situation for 2026 for Minnesota, who do you think is going to be released to create some room? Because we know this season hasn't really panned out so far. And it's looking like there's still going to be one of these. It's going to be a complicated mess for the situation room when it comes to cap space for the Vikings. So what are your thoughts on that? Who's going to get moved out to create some room?
Yeah, this is a great place to start. When you're thinking about the draft, you're thinking about draft needs. You know, you have a job like mine doing the mock drafts and stuff. You also have to project out in advance of that. What are the offseason moves going to be, obviously, prior to the NFL draft? And so going through sort of the roster situation so we can sort of try to project that will be a good sort of grounding foundation for us getting into this discussion. Right now, if you look at the websites that post the cap space, if you're a Vikings fan, your eyes are going to get wide. You're not going to love what you see because it's minus $36 million in cap space for 2026. There's a couple things to keep in mind with that, though. You have almost $15 million in cap space this season that can be rolled over to next year, which would knock that down to around minus 20. And then there's a whole bunch of releases the Vikings, I believe, are going to make or could make, and then potential restructures as well to get under there. So first, I'm going to start with the group that I think, you can look at that's either going to leave in free agency or retire off this roster. That group would include Jalen Nailor, I think is probably going to leave this offseason, hopefully, and probably is going to net the Vikings a comp pick when he walks out the door. CJ Ham, I think, is probably headed for retirement. Eric Wilson was signed to the one-year contract. He's had a really good season. Is that going to price him out of the Vikings range, which would also net another comp pick if that does? I don't believe that Justin School will be back. I do not believe that Jeff Okudah will be back. And Harry the Hitman is almost assuredly going to be retiring after this season. Then you go into the releases. Okay, so if these guys are cut pre-June 1, I'm going to give you those, and then I'm going to give you the amount of cap space that you would save by cutting these guys pre-June 1. Aaron Jones, you'd say $7.2 million in cap space. Ryan Kelly, was it a great signing? We debate that, probably no, but at least the contract was structured to allow you to easily get out after 1 year with very little dead cap hit. You release Ryan Kelly pre-June 1, you save $12 million on the cap. Javon Hargrave, you release him $11 million in savings. If then I'm going to go with TJ Hawkinson, it's, he's just been assumed as a cut. And I think that there certainly is the distinct possibility of that. But I think the two ways that this is going to be done is either Hawkinson gets restructured, or it's going to be a release that is designated post June 1, just because of the math on it. If you designate TJ Hawkinson as a post June 1 cut, you save $16 million in the cap. Hawkinson is under contract for 2 more years after this. You could potentially look to restructure that, which would also save a whole bunch in cap. So they're going to do one thing or the other, either restructure Hawkinson or cut him after, with the post June 1 designation on that. Then, so obviously that clears out a whole bunch of money. And then you also have, there's a small handful of guys that you can restructure in order to save a bunch of money. That list, Justin Jefferson, who we're going to be talking a lot about this offseason.
Oh, yeah.
Both of your edge rushers in Grenard and Van Ginkel could easily be restructured. Both of your offensive tackles, Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill, could also very, very easily be restructured. There's a couple more, but that group of 5, I think, is the, sort of at the forefront of the restructure discussions. And then I also thought, lastly, just going through this, the guys that would be staying that, some people are annoyed with right now because of performance. Jonathan Allen, I think, is going to be on the roster next year just because of the way that his contract is structured. And then Will Fries hasn't played very well this year. He ain't going anywhere because of his contract. Byron Murphy has regressed this year, although I have a plan to get him to bounce back next year, which is very simple. And we'll get into that later on, but he will also be staying because of his contract. But you do these things with the releases, again, the designations of potential restructures. You will be able to not only get out from under the negative, but you will be able to carve out some cap space. It is not going to be nearly as much as you had last offseason when you went on the shopping spree, although then again, Kwesi has shown to be much better with financial constraints in free agency than he has when he has Fort Knox. The 2024 free agency class was awesome, and that's when he was bargain bin shopping. 2025 class, when he had all the cash to throw around. Leave something to be desired. So this is going to look more like your 2024 cap situation deal heading into free agency this coming off season. You'll be able to sign a couple starters, but that'll be about it.
So you're telling me that this big red number here that might scare some Vikings fans, $35,983,572 in the red, is maybe not as big of an issue with some of the proposals that you're making?
Yeah, in the NFL, people say the cap isn't real. That's not exactly true, but let's just say the cap, it is, the rules with it is open to make it into gymnastics, where you can do all sorts of stuff with moving money around in this different restructure stuff. And then the rules of carrying cap space over to the next year. I was kind of surprised in free agency that so much money was deferred to next year when they appeared to be retaining cap space for this year. And they didn't end up using the $15 million, but they can roll that over.
And the one that kind of throws my head into spin a little bit, because it's been a weird year for him. It's been frustrating. But Justin Jefferson, you're talking about a restructure with him, but it takes two to tango, right? Is there any worry on your end? And this is just purely speculation, but is there something where they maybe bring an offer to the table of, hey, let's restructure here so we can get you some help and get the ball back in your hands here potentially, but maybe he just doesn't want to? Is there any worry in that sense for you, or do you think Justin Jefferson plays ball no problem?
Justin Jefferson has obviously throughout to this point in his tenure has been an enormous team player, and the thing that that you appreciate so much about him, obviously he's going to go down as one of the great receivers in NFL history. But unlike a lot of the other people that you would put on that list, Justin Jefferson is not a diva, right? Mm-hmm. He's a team first kind of a guy. And this offseason, there is sort of, there's a lot of discussion about this right now because of where the team is right now. And would Justin Jefferson, is he going to ask for a trade? I mean, there hasn't been anything out of the Jefferson camp, but that's just rampant speculation or whatever. Yeah. But if you're on Jefferson's side, and you do want a different outcome than just sort of rolling it forward with the Vikings, you might have a little bit of leverage here when the Vikings try to sit down with you to restructure that contract. It's hard to predict what someone else is thinking. So I can't, I wouldn't think that Justin Jefferson, from what I know of Justin Jefferson, I wouldn't think that a trade ask is coming in the offseason, but he will certainly have the opportunities if that's the way that his head is leaning at that time.
So after all these moves and kind of like the smoke clears, you've made your cuts, you've made pre and post June 1, you've restructured some things. Give me the overview on what you think would be the big holes for the Vikings prior to free agency coming.
Yeah, so this would be, I have sort of primary needs here and sort of secondary needs, and to keep in mind that there will be enough cap space carved out to plug a couple of these in free agency. Okay. I'm thinking maybe like two. But the huge ones for me, you just look at it after that exercise we did. Boundary cornerback is a huge one. And what I was referring to with Byron Murphy before, I brought this up, numerous times going back on the Thursday episodes and stuff like that. The decision not to sign another starting boundary corner in addition to Isaiah Rodgers had a devastating domino effect on the Viking secondary. What that required was taking Byron Murphy out of the nickel role that he is so good at and moving him full-time to the boundary. He played, of course, some boundary, he would moonlight there as well, but primary in the nickel, and he's just so good there. But now he had to move out and become a primary boundary cornerback across from Rodgers because you didn't sign that. So that moved him away from the position he's good at, and then that required moving another player away from the position he's good at to a position he's not as good at, with Josh Metellus going from the move piece role into the nickel. Josh Metellus is not as good of a man coverage guy downfield. It just is what it is. And then you take the value of his position versatility. You get your other legitimate starting boundary cornerback across from Rodgers. You can now kick Murphy back to the position he's best at, nickel. You can kick Metellus back to the position he's the best at with that move piece safety thing. So that's to me, that is the biggest one. It's the need that I've been talking about with them for now over a year. So, Quasi, please get another boundary cornerback so we don't have to play people out of position next year. Then if Hawkinson has been released, right? This is one of the big ones that are up in the air. Some of those other release decisions we were talking about, I think, are kind of easy, to be honest. The Hawkinson one is interesting. Whether you do that post June 1 cut or whether you attempt to restructure him. But if you do end up moving on from Hawkinson, and you would get a bunch of cap savings, like I was mentioning, the $16 million, if you designate him post June 1. If you do that, though, you have obviously a huge need at tight end, and that's a position that is used in this offense. They love doing the 12 personnel stuff. And Josh Oliver, he's a third offensive tackle. And, he can catch a little bit, but he ain't fooling anyone along his route tree. He's not going to, it's a guy who is the pure inline when you go to 12 personnel. If you move on from Hawkinson, you need the receiving tight end to replace him. There are a couple options in the draft, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit later on, but that obviously would be another big one. Safety goes without saying. Harrison Smith is not going to be around here next year. Hopefully you get Metellus back into the role that he's better at, but you're still going to need another safety back there. Then the other ones, running back with Aaron Jones probably getting released at the end of the season, and Jordan Mason looking, we've seen now Jordan Mason, we have tape on him going back. Jordan Mason's a good NFL RB2. I don't believe that you want to put him in as a lead back for an entire season or head into a season with him as that guy. So you're going to need, assuming that you release Aaron Jones as we expect, you're going to need the complement to Mason, and probably you're going to want a guy that Mason can complement, to put it sort of the other way, and keep Mason as sort of the 1B guy. Center, of course. And that one gets interesting as far as how do they see Brendel long-term, right? But Ryan Kelly is not going to be on this roster next year. And so what are you doing at center? Do you view Brendel as a long-term center, or is that a guy that you would rather have as going forward as the forgive me jumping in the time machine here for Minnesota sports fans, but keeping Brendel as like the Nick Punto of the offensive line, where he can play all 5 positions, and then based on injury you plug him in everywhere. So that one's going to be interesting to monitor, but you have to put center on that list for that reason. And then my other top need for the Vikings, and this one doesn't get talked about as much, but it's actually a good year to have this need based on where the draft is with this position group, and that's off-ball linebacker. Eric Wilson, we all appreciate the way that he's playing, and he's made flash plays. He's been great on special teams, and obviously he has seamlessly replaced Ivan Pace. They were able to get Ivan Pace out of the lineup. I do wonder if Eric Wilson has priced himself out of the Vikings' range, in particular because of the dearth of cap space that we've been talking about. And the linebacker group, again, we'll talk about this more in depth, and we have 5 months. We're gonna get pretty deep into this linebacker group in this class. Pretty good. So this is a decent year to be shopping for an off-ball linebacker, and it's a position group where you can get a day 1 starter on day 2, which obviously appealing there as well. You go into secondary needs then. Wide receiver 3, of course, would become one if and when Jalen Naylor, on the free market takes a bigger contract. You need depth in the trenches on both sides. And especially the offensive line depth. We have seen the manifestations of that this year. But even if you go out and you get a starting center elsewhere, and even if you still have Brendel, you need to improve the depth there, based on what we've seen this year. An interior defensive line, you need added depth there as well. I think you could also make a very strong argument that the one thing that this interior defensive line was missing, even though it has caused havoc in some of these different games. We like some of the guys that they've drafted at that position, bringing them up. That's one of the positions they've drafted well at. Can't point to a bunch of other positions recently that they've done that, but interior defensive line, certainly one of them. But the one thing that position group could use, I think, is a true occupying nose tackle, a war daddy guy to muck stuff up against the run. that Harrison Phillips, was it a sexy player? No, but he did the dirty work that allowed linebackers to flow behind him. And as I've stated on the Thursday episodes, I do not think it is a coincidence that Ivan Pace's run defense cratered this year when he was no longer playing behind Harrison Phillips. Now all of a sudden he's getting touched more by offensive linemen. It doesn't go well with Ivan Pace's game, and so you're able to just erase him from plays. And now he's starting to press, and he's doing his Tasmanian devil thing, and now he's overrunning plays when he does have angles. If the Vikings were able to get an occupying interior defensive lineman, that's a guy that I think could get on the field fairly early, just because it would address a acute need there, something that the run defense going down a little bit this year. You get that guy back, I think you can get that thing back up and running the way that it was before. So those would be some of the ones that I would toss out as sort of like ancillary, beyond the obvious ones we just talked about.
Going back to like the higher priority needs, I don't know if those you listed in level of priority, but it sounds like the cornerback is probably your number one need there. But following that, is it you're more concerned safety, you're more concerned running back? What's your next one after that, where it's like you have to address this offseason?
It would be definitely safety, but the Hawkinson thing, if you do cut, obviously that becomes a huge priority. Would I put it over safety? I don't know, but those ones, I think if you cut Hawkinson, you have to put that one in the top three as well. And so I would probably put those, just not knowing how the team sees Brendel long term is why I'm going to put center at number 4 on that list. But yeah, 2, 3 for me. The Hawkinson thing would put tight end in that top 3.
So looking ahead here, Vikings right now sitting in the 11th spot of the draft, holding 8 picks altogether. They're also projected to currently get a round 3 comp pick here. And for the visual audience on YouTube, I'm going to pull this up. That would be for the departure of Sam Darnold here this past offseason. But when it comes to that, let's talk a little bit about the comp pick situations and who leading into who is actually going to be making those picks. Will it still be Kwesi? I would love to hear your thoughts on that whole formula.
Yeah, well, we'll start with the comp picks, because this past off season when the Vikings made all their signings and Kwesi made the decision to go after some guys that have been released, older guys that have been released, some of them coming off injuries, and obviously on the field that a lot of those decisions haven't worked out, but he seemed to be doing that in part to begin playing the comp pick game. And you did end up you are going to get the 3rd round pick from Sam Darnold leaving. However, at the time, we thought that there was a real shot the Vikings would end up with 3 comp picks. That was sort of the talk around then. But based on the way the season's gone, even with Daniel Jones playing really, really well, the Vikings currently are only projected to get the 1 extra comp pick. And that is in part because of the emergence of Eric Wilson, where now he has gone above sort of the line where he becomes a qualifying free agent that counts in this comp pick formula, which means he crosses one of the qualifying free agents off that you lost. Right. So it eliminates a draft pick. And so AJ, you look down there on that graph there and you see Fries, Wilson, Rogers, Kelly as all qualifying guys that cross off your potential for comp picks. And then the 4 that it cross off on the Viking side, Bynum, Daniel Jones, Cam Robinson, and Patrick Jones, those 4 guys. So that's how you only end up with the 1. There still is a shot that the Vikings could recoup the second one, which almost assuredly would be in the 4th round, at the end of the 4th round via the Daniel Jones thing. But that's going to require that one of those 4 guys you currently see blacked out there on the right. For those watching on YouTube, that's going to require one of them to fall beneath the threshold that is counted in the comp pick formula. And it doesn't look super probable right now, but it is something to keep an eye on.
Moving into that transition of, is Kwesi still going to be making those picks? I mean, there's a lot of rumors, especially swirling with just how the season has gone. And you have the extension of Kevin O'Connell, so he's already locked up. But Kwesi, it's one of those things where there might be a question mark there. Do you see him going into the draft and actually being the guy who uses this 3rd round comp pick and the other 8 that the Vikings have?
This to me is the most fascinating question of the Vikings offseason is, are you going to bring Kwesi back? We know that there's going to be firings. is the scapegoat going to end up being a couple smaller lieutenants in the front office, and then a couple, assistant coaches, and perhaps the special teams coordinator, or do the Wills feel like they need to offer up a bigger one? And that's where the Kwesi thing could potentially come in. And depending how upset the Wills are with this season, maybe then you ransack the whole front office and restart there. But if you just go sort of the smaller thing and you keep Kwesi, nobody thinks O'Connell's going to get fired. But if you also keep Kwesi there and you just fire some of their assistants, then you're giving Kwesi the opportunity here to use 9 picks, 10 picks, depending on that last comp pick. But the Vikings are sitting on an enormous amount of draft equity for next year. You have your own first round pick, which right now is number 11, like we were just talking about, but you have the potential upward mobility to get that one. I think up to 5 is the highest that I think that you can go, looking at the standings. And you also have cushion beneath you. I don't want to say that the Vikings are locked into a top 11 pick, but they do appear to have that cushioning beneath them, with only the Dolphins 1 game ahead of them, but the Dolphins playing really well right now. And then the 2 teams that are 2 games better, I think it's the Chiefs and the Steelers. I don't think anyone thinks that the Vikings are going to finish 3 games better than either of those 2 teams over the last 5. So that's sort of what you're ending up looking at. That pick is obviously going to be a huge asset. Vikings also have their own round 2, round 3, round 4, and round 7. And then they also own the Eagles' round 5 pick, the Colts' round 6 pick, and the Jaguars' round 7 pick, in addition to the 3rd round comp pick coming from Sam, and then the possibility of that second one. Are you going to allow Kwesi to preside over a draft where you are sitting on this metric ton of draft equity that, to his credit, we'll give him a little bit, that he helped to accrue? Now, last draft, he boxed himself in advance of that because of the lack of equity, but this time you have a whole bunch. This is a big opportunity to move a needle for a franchise. Will the Wills end up trusting Kwesi enough again to call those shots and be sitting at the top of that sort of decision-making hierarchy that they have set up at this time? That we'll have to see. But I brought up the idea of the Kwesi audit of all of his draft picks. Yeah. AJ and I will be doing a draft pick audit episode here coming up of the Kwesi regime, probably in about a month, around the end of the regular season. And so we'll end up. We didn't feel like that was a really good one to maybe start the War Room Wednesday series, but we will end up doing that around then. And then we will also, if it looks like in a month here that Kwesi might be on his way out, we will also do a deep dive episode of potential replacements for him. I think it might be a little bit premature to end up trying to give his office away right this minute, but a situation that we will continue to monitor. But yeah, that is the fascinating question of this offseason, is who is going to preside over both the decisions they're going to have to make with the cap and who's getting cut, because now you're kind of backed into a corner with that. You're going to have to make some tough decisions. And then when you get to draft time and you have all this draft equity, who's going to be making those picks?
I mean, and to use your words here, it's a metric ton of equity that the Vikings hold for the upcoming draft. But the problem, Thor, is not every draft is built the same. Like, some of these drafts are so top heavy, where if you don't get one of these, top, 10-ish picks, and then there's a huge gap between the talent level, or otherwise you're hearing the rumor swirling that, if you're looking for a quarterback, not necessarily the Vikings are, I know some fans maybe feel different, but this might not be the draft to do so. Is this draft going to actually live up to some of the hype for certain positions of need that the Vikings might have? Like, are the players actually going to be good?
Yeah, I think overall, treetop view of this draft class, I think it's a below average class. I don't think it's a horrible one, though. If you were doing a bell curve where you had the same amount of Fs as As of NFL draft class quality, like going back the last 40 years, and then you were going to put this one on the line of continuum and give it a letter grade in advance of the thing, I would be between a D+ and a C-. Okay. So not the worst, but below average for me, a bit below average. And for the Vikings to have a shot with their round 1 pick to trade that down, or trade it for it to become a monster asset where you're getting a whole bunch of calls and teams are willing to do something silly to trade up for it, you're probably going to have to be in the top 5 or 6. And this goes back to what you were sort of teeing up there, AJ, of the dearth of quarterback talent in this class, there's a possibility that we only have 2 first-round quarterbacks, or else it looks like it's going to be 3. And that's going to come down to the decisions of Oregon's Dante Moore and South Carolina's Lenora Sellers. Most people in my industry think that Lenora Sellers is going to return to college, probably by auctioning his services off in the transfer portal. We'll have to see about that. But Lenora Sellers, he's a guy you comp to like a very raw Cam Newton. He's not Cam Newton. Auburn Cam Newton is last year at Auburn essentially single-handedly dragged the team to a national title game, a team that had a poor coaching staff and had very little talent around him, at least on offense. I don't know that Auburn team had another drafted player on offense outside of Cam Newton. Lenora Sellers is not there in his development, but you just look at the physical ability, the athleticism, the arm strength. There are similarities there in terms of that, but he needs more polish. So Lenore's might be going back to college. Dante Moore, there's been reports that is the way that he is leaning, going back to college for a last year. And of course, Phil Knight and those folks up in Oregon, they have plenty of money to potentially incentivize him to stay for a 4th year on campus. Dante Moore. But the Oregon Ducks going to be going to the CFP. If they make a long run, would that change the equation? And their offensive coordinator, Oregon's Will Stein, just accepted the head coaching job at Kentucky. Oregon has had good offensive coordinators the last 2 times under Dan Lanning. His first 2 hires at offensive coordinator have been good. Kenny Dillingham and then Will Stein. And those guys are both Power 4 head coaches right now. If you're Dante Moore, are you going to roll the dice that that Lanning hits on a 3rd offensive coordinator in a row? I'm not sure about that. So those factors could affect the Dante Moore thing. The Vikings aren't going to take a quarterback in round 1 in this class, but the decisions of those quarterbacks, it does affect any team that you're looking at as a potential that's going to get a top 10 pick here, and particularly the ones that are in that top 5-6 range. Because if we have certainly 2, but if you have 3, those guys are going to be off the board in the first 5 or 6 picks. And you are going to have some desperate teams that are looking to get up into that range. So that's where you're going to have to get to sort of auction off the pick. But at the top, there are guys at positions that the Vikings certainly need if a possibility like that is not out there.
So with those positions in need here, let's maybe do a quick overview on what you think of the cornerback class, of the safety class, of maybe the center class. Is there a position group there that you think the Vikings could attack early, or maybe could value later in one of the middle rounds, where you think a guy you value higher than maybe most? I know we're not super deep into the weeds here yet of your research as we approach draft time. I know we certainly will get there. So based on your knowledge as of right now here on December 3rd, what do you think about those 3 groups?
To me, when I go through the, and obviously the declaration deadline, we're about a month and change away from it. So, obviously we have to see who's actually in it, but you just look at the classes right now and projecting like who we think will be in the class. The two position groups with weakness, it's fortunate for the Vikings in this class. I think the 2 worst class position groups, it's quarterback and offensive tackle, at least from what we've seen in recent years to this year. The offensive both those classes, really, we thought they were going to be better in the summer. And a whole bunch of quarterbacks flamed out or had disappointing seasons. The Drew Alars, the Cade Klubniks, the Garrett Nussmeyers, even Sellers himself. And if Sellers declares, I do think he goes in the first round just on physical ability, but we were hoping that it would be a definitive, if Lenora Sellers exploded, he's probably going to be the first pick because he's that physically gifted. But you had so many guys fall off like that, that now when you're looking at the top of the thing there, it's Mendoza is the guy that everyone talks about. Mendoza is going to go really quick, and absolutely could be the first overall pick. He might even be the favorite right now to be the first overall pick. It's got to be him or Dante Moore. And then Ty Simpson from Alabama is the other guy, talking about those quarterbacks. Yeah. So, that's sort of that position group. And then offensive tackle, that one really fell off the shelf. Over the summer, we thought that position group could be really good. And some of these offensive tackles that transferred in the portal, then their games played way down. There's this kid, Isaiah World, from the year before at Nevada. He was just dominant. And then he transferred to Oregon. He has not been as dominant in the Big Ten as he was in the MWC. There was an example of that too. Xavier Chaplin, another big offensive tackle that projects as a right tackle in the NFL. He was dominant at Virginia Tech in the ACC, and then he went to Auburn this year and found out SEC football is a little bit different. So some of those guys, they've fallen. Yeah, who would have thought they've fallen back from their projections of potential round one guys, and that position group is suffered because of that. The strengths of this coming class, the big one, and it's funny because this position group, it did the opposite thing of the two that I just talked about. This is a position group coming into the season we were super duper underwhelmed with, and there's been all kinds of guys that have emerged and guys that have planted their flag as like, I am a round one prospect, and now we have a bunch of them. That's wide receiver. The wide receiver group this year is pretty dang good. And what's crazy is next year's receiver class in 2027, that's the one we've been talking about for multiple years, could be a historic position group. But in advance of that, it's a pretty nice appetizer we have here at the wide receiver class. I think this is topical for the Vikings in their, looking at the idea of a wide receiver 3, which they're going to have to add. And the Vikings right now don't have a ton of depth at receiver beyond that. Well, I made the plea on yesterday's show, play Ty Felton, so we at least have an idea of what we have in Ty Felton as a wide receiver heading into next year. Mm-hmm. If we don't see Ty Felton here the last 5 games, you wonder, do they view him as playable at all at that position, right? Like, is he in their plans next year to get more playing time? Could he be a wide receiver 4 for an entire year? Are you comfortable with it? It does not seem that they will be comfortable heading into the next season with Ty Felton as wide receiver 3. I think that we can all sort of comfortably state that. Then in Miles Price, mostly just a returner guy. So you have to add the wide receiver 3, and this wide receiver class has depth. So that could be a position. You have 2 third-round picks right now. You have the 4th round pick. Maybe somewhere in there, but not a Ty Felton guy. Don't with the 3rd round comp you got from Darnold. Don't do the thing you do with Ty Felton and reach 2 rounds on a wide receiver this time, hopefully. But that position group is good. Interior defensive line, that position group is pretty good too in this class, and that's pretty deep. There are a couple of those planet-sized occupying true nose tackles that I am very intrigued by. I was sort of referring to before that the Vikings will end up having access to, and some of those guys are going to go on day 2 as well. If you end up prioritizing that position, the Vikings have bigger needs than interior defensive line, and this is one of the few bright spot positions with the Vikings this year, right? Because we were, over the summer, you're a little bit concerned. You're just looking at the names and the experience of guys of the depth there. But they, and then after the trade of Harrison Phillips, but you've had all these different guys step, Jalen Redmond and Levi Drake Rodriguez, and then some of the really intriguing prospects you have coming up. But the true nose tackles, we will have some in this class, and Dominic Orange, Big Citrus from Iowa State is one of my pet prospects for that, a guy that you just cannot uproot, that would help a run defense immediately. The last 2 that I see is clearly above some of the groups that have come before it in the past couple of years with the position groups is linebacker. I've sort of shouted this out earlier. The linebacker class is awesome. Okay. This is another one we've seen a whole bunch of guys emerge, and there's all kinds of fun linebackers in this class too. You have something for every kind of a taste. I mean, just 2 Ohio State kids that are just super interesting contrast. Arvell Reese, a guy who's going to go very, very quick in round 1, is a former defensive end, an edge rusher that then they move back to off ball, but he frequently still plays on edge. It's similar-ish to the Abdul Carter thing. Where Abdul Carter had been an off-ball linebacker at Penn State up until his last year. I'm just talking in reverse, essentially. Although both of those guys, you can play both, whatever. But Reese goes back from edge to off-ball, and now moonlighting. But his game, he's taken off this year. The guy's obviously he's an awesome pass rusher, but he's doing really interesting things in space. You see him doing quarterback spy stuff while still sort of minding responsibilities in his zone and getting his arms into passing lanes. He had Damon Williams of Washington in the 3rd circle of hell of that game when Ohio State played Washington earlier this season. Damon Williams, a little sort of pint-sized dual threat scrambler guy, and he likes to get out on the perimeter and then, where he has options and he can tuck and run if he wants. Arvell Reese is like, he locked him in a jail cell for 4 quarters. And Damon Williams is like, I don't want to be here anymore.
Let me out.
Yeah, exactly. And then their other off-ball linebacker, Ohio State's, is a guy named Sonny Styles. And it's fascinating because Sonny Styles, he also is a position convert, but coming from the back end. He's a former safety that was 6'3", and he has long arms. and he has gotten up to over 230 pounds, and he can move around obviously real well, and he's awesome in coverage, of course, befitting of a former defensive back. But just an example, two guys from one school, but all kinds of. Jacob Rodriguez from Texas Tech is a guy that people have bandied about as a potential Heisman guy. He's sort of the opposite, where he's like the grinder, smart guy, football instincts. He's at the ball or knows the play, beats before everyone else based on the movement of guys, stuff like this, but undersized, and the measurables aren't going to be quite as good there, but a guy potentially could get on a discount. And then the last group I had to shout out as a position strength, and this one should make Viking fans very happy, is cornerback. The cornerback class, I think, is going to be really, really good. And we got depth with that thing as well. And it'll be interesting. Do you end up, like the one thing it might lack is like a true top 10, kind of like the Jeff Okudah is one of the recent guys, the cornerbacks that went in the top 10. So not like Jeff Okudah, but like, if the Vikings end up picking in the top 10, I don't know if there's a cornerback there that you would take just in terms of value. But on day 2, there should be plenty that you could project could step into that starting spot across from Isaiah Rodgers to set about the reverse chain of events that happened this time. We'll do it in the good direction. We'll kick Murphy back to the nickel. We'll kick Metellus back to the move piece role. So there will be options for you there, or certainly a trade down. One guy, we're going to talk about him plenty this spring, but that I think fits the Viking system, at least the current one under Flores, really, really well. Is Avion Terrell, outside boundary cornerback from Clemson. He's the brother of AJ Terrell, the Falcons cornerback, but slightly different games there, where Avion is smaller than AJ Terrell, but he's much more fluid athletically, and he's really good both on the blitz and against the run. He's one of those guys that helps out with that too. There's a game about a month ago where Avion Terrell he's blitzing out from, right field, right? As a cornerback, whatever, but he sort of sneaking up, and then he ends up coming off the edge, and it was either I think it was a tight end that stepped up to try to block him, and Terrell went right through the guy's chest. And Terrell's like 185, but he's like this bat out of hell when he's attacking forward. But as far as a cornerback, you can leave him on islands. You certainly could in the ACC. It's one of those very sticky kind of guys, feisty. So the times when Flores is sending heat, you can trust Terrell back there on islands one-on-one. And then lastly, just some positions that I view as more or less average. Like if you were to look at like the talent of the position groups, these ones against like the last 5 years and sort of like average it out, that I think these ones would be right around the quality level of the last 5 years. Running back, the running back class, you have your sort of prototypical, top guy in Jeremiah Love, who I know Viking fans, we're going to be talking about Jeremiah Love quite a bit this spring. I have lots of thoughts on Jeremiah Love, but then you have, it's just sort of like a regular running back class, whereas last year's class was so awesome. This one, we move sort of back to average, but it's not a bad one like we had a couple years ago where it was like Trey Benson and Jonathan Brooks at the top. This one is significantly better than that. Small step back from last year. The tight end group, I'd put around average. You have one first-round guy in Kenyon Sadiq, and then you have series of intriguing day 2 and then early kind of day 3 kind of guys. But yeah, you just have sort of the round one guy there in Sadiq. And then the interior offensive line, I would put that around average. Although I will say the center class, if you were to separate between center and guard, I might put the center class a bit above average, depending on a couple potential position converts that will bolster that. There's a couple guys that I think are probably moving inside to center that I think will really help that position group. One guy, Brian Parker from Duke, has been this tremendous offensive tackle in college, but he has super short arms. But the kid's athletic and he's super smart. And it reminds you a whole heck of a lot from a couple years ago. I remember Graham Barton, who ends up getting taken by the Bucs. He was a tackle at Duke, and then they end up shifting him into center. And we've seen this Cody Whitehair. We've seen this kind of over and over again with this happening. Obviously tackle to guard happens a lot, but we do see the tackle to center sometimes as well. Brian Parker, a guy that could do that. But center class is decent. I think this year there will be options for the Vikings there. And then the last two, edge rusher. Some people say edge rusher, really, really good class. I put it average, slightly above average, looking at the last 5 years. But I still think it's a decent class. And then safety being the last one. And you might be able to put safety, say it's like slightly above average. I just had 3 designations, so I ended up putting it at average. But with safety, you have your mega god prospect, Caleb Downs, who is way at the top. And that's someone that I'm interested in for the Vikings. That, we'll be talking about Caleb Downs plenty, but there is a big drop after Caleb Downs. I think Caleb Downs will be the only safety that you see in round 1. But then when you get into day 2, I think there's a whole bunch of interesting safeties. Okay. So you do have this enormous gulf, but you have the elite prospect at that position group, and you have a small handful of day 2 guys that you can point to and be like, I'd probably be comfortable with that guy starting from day 1.
All right. Well, hey, I think the only way to round out the show after the sort of that discussion was with a nice PFF mock draft.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's kick this off.
So for the visual audience here on YouTube, we've got the mock draft here on pff.com. For the audio only audience here, we'll do our best to kind of run through it here. I think just because of timing today, and we're going to do hundreds of these. So we'll do 2 rounds today as the Vikings, and we'll kick things off here. And Thor, you let me know watching if you want me to pause at any point, if you want to trade up. Otherwise, we'll get into the Vikings picks and see who's available and whatnot. So
let's do this.
As we start here on the clock, the Tennessee Titans go Caleb Downs. So there's your guy right off the bat.
Can you imagine if a safety went number 1 overall? That's kind of incredible. I mean, this is not going to happen. And just one thing really quick, AJ, the Titans appearing like they are obviously the front runner to get the number 1 overall pick for a second straight year. This would be the first trade domino. The Titans, what you're going to see, they're going to auction that pick off to one of those quarterback needy teams. And they're going to flip spots with them. Fortunately for them, there's several there up at the top. It's just about who's going to be most incentivized to want to pick the first one. Is that going to be the Raiders? Is that going to be the Browns? The Browns have a lot of equity there. The Saints with Shuck, they have a decision to make there. So, how does that end up playing out? But I absolutely think the Titans are going to trade down. I don't think you're going to see a safety first overall, but.
Okay. When it comes to where we are here, we go Reuben Bain, Peter Woods, Dante Moore, Ty Simpson. Does that kind of shake out how you expect as we move into pick 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 here?
I would no, just because Mendoza's not off the board yet. I would think like a more realistic one, you'd have Mendoza at the top. But those two, the part that I do find realistic, those other 2 guys are off the board. Like I was saying before, it's going to be top 5, 6, somewhere in there where you see those 3 quarterbacks go off the board. This one with the Titans sitting in that first pick, obviously it changes the equation a little bit there. But yeah, that you're going to see the 3 quarterback if indeed there's 3. Again, that goes back to Dante Moore's decision, and in part Lenore Sellers. But I don't take that one as seriously right now. Dante Moore's decision, then you'll have the 3.
All right, so we'll resume here with the Commanders on the clock. They go with Jeremiah Love.
We're not going to have that debate then.
Arvell Reese, Mekhi Lemon.
That's high for Mekhi Lemon. Mendoza's not going to go in the top 10? Wow.
I guess not. So Cassius Howell is the pick right before the Vikings here, who step up. If this is how the draft were to pan out for the Vikings, I mean, does this sit pretty well for presumably Kwesi and crew? Or do you think they've already missed out on some guys here?
It's not the best way for the board to fall to him, because I would want the ability. I would like to consider either Caleb Downs or perhaps Jeremiah Love at the 11th pick. And now obviously those guys are off the board. McCoy, PFF has Jermod McCoy as CB1. I don't. Jermod McCoy hasn't played this year. He tore up his knee in January, and he was really good in 2024. There's other, NFL draft analysts that just sort of trust that and trust him coming off of that. I am not convinced that Jermod McCoy, after this last season, that he will declare. And if he does, you could say that I'm not as confident as others that he will be the first cornerback off the board, just because in fact, there's a Tennessee cornerback this year that's dang near doing what he did last year. That's Colton Hood. It's just that he played this year. So that one I don't love. Mansour Delane would be interesting here for the Vikings, and Vikings, an organization that have taken a lot of LSU Tigers over the years, keeping those guys in purple and yellow. Mansour Delane, to me, is cornerback 1 in this class. He transferred to LSU from Virginia Tech and has been utterly dominant this year. I call him Delane Island. So that's a guy that the Vikes could consider here. these other positions, edge, we ain't taking an edge, wide receiver, Carnell Tate, hell of a player, really good player. I saw someone comped him to Judd. I think that's a apocryphal for a couple of different reasons, but when you watch Carnell Tate play, he's this really, really smooth 6'3", right around 200 pounds, Ohio State boundary receiver that does a really good job keeping his feet in around the sidelines. He's a contortionist. His ball skills are awesome. He's silky smooth. And like, so on the one hand, I just said he was comped to a Vikings receiver, and I found it a bit above his import, but now I'm about to admit to you that there's a Viking legend receiver that sometimes when I'm watching Carnell Tate, he reminds me of. That guy's initials are CC. There does appear to be some Carter in Carnell Tate's game. So, I mean, that's a guy that if you would probably there would have to be a wide receiver trade in advance. I don't know if you're going to add that Carnell Tate, a third wide receiver, in deference of your other needs. If you still want to run 12 personnel, keep scrolling. Just give me a little scroll down there, AJ.
Absolutely, yeah.
Kenyon Sadiq would be of potential interest here too. He is easily the tight end 1 in this class and is absolute mega god of an athlete. He is going to blow the roof off of Indianapolis. And the thing about Kenyon Sadiq is he's an awesome run blocker as well. I hope, AJ, we're going to have to talk and see if we can get film. So, someone asked about that in one of the comments. If we could show prospect film, I would love to. We will look into that and make sure that we keep our new channel up while still being able to do that. But reason that I'm talking about this, I have to show you folks Kenyon Sadiq's blocking film, because you just don't believe it. Like he has sort of a game of one of those like H-back, like movie kind of guys that you put in the slot, and a lot of those guys end up being finesse. And Kenyon Sadiq is the opposite of finesse. So Kenyon Sadiq would be of interest to me here too. For me, if you're sticking in this spot, I would be between Delane and Sadiq. Under the thing that you have released TJ Hawkinson.
Okay. I was gonna say otherwise here. I mean, there's 4 teams that PFF is saying is interested in trading here. If you did want to move back a few spots, Pittsburgh at pick 14, Carolina at 15.
Let's just take a look and see if we could add a second round pick. I'd be interested in that. We have to try out a trade offer on our first mock session of the process.
So let's offer this first one. Let's say we're going to move back to 14, and you want to do
C46. Now toss in 111 on our end. Let's see where we go. What is it?
44% chance of being
toss in 189.
If we do that, that bumps it up to about a 50% chance to go.
Give that a shot.
Let's see. Trade accepted. All right. So we have moved back. We'll let the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Now we got a third pick for this exercise, which I appreciate.
There we go. Let's see who they go ahead and select here. They go with Jamad McCoy.
They can take him.
Keldrick Folk.
Oh, God. This lines up perfect. We got the same decision. I'm AJ, just because I've been harping on the cornerback thing, and because that is going to be a thing, and we don't know about the Hawkinson, I would like to take my boy Delane Island here and get the legitimate boundary starter across from Rodgers. Now Murphy, we're playing him up next year. Go back to nickel. Metellus, we're playing him up next year. Going back to move piece row. So let's bring in Mansour Delane from LSU.
All right, let's go ahead. Mansour Delane there. So pick 14. Vikings go quarterback here, and then your guy Carnell Tate, Sonny Styles follows.
Carnell Tate would be a hell of a pick for the Panthers. A team that has Tedero McMillan, and then you have 2 other young receivers in Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker. I was a big fan of Jalen Coker coming out. I couldn't understand why he didn't get drafted that process, but Xavier Legette, they have made a mistake, the Panthers, trying to make him into a boundary receiver. What Xavier Legette, he's a manufactured touch guy out of the slot. That's what he has to be. Downfield, the ball skills aren't quite as good. He's not a great route runner. If you can manufacture him the touches, like he could be, maybe what people wanted like Laviska Shenault to be or something like that. And you could basically set up a thing where it's him against Coker for the slot, and then if you took Carnell Tate to have him across from McMillan, and then you would have wide receiver depth there for Carolina. So I thought that pick was interesting. So man, Sadiq fell all the way to 24. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's why I paused here. Because, I mean, if we had potentially, with now picks, 43 and 46, I want to say, maybe it's an overpay, but if you really loved Sadiq that much, this is something for later on down the road. We could have tried to maybe move up here. Now we know that he's going to be going around that kind of 23, 24, 25, but I'll press resume here
for now.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we get into early March, right after the NFL Combine, I think you're going to see Mr. Sadiq is going to be ranked, closer to where the Vikings are actually slotted in this kind of exercise. Because I think he's going to put up the guy where he really just blew people's minds when he tested his pre-draft process, Vernon Davis. You might see. I don't want to say you're going to test like Vernon Davis, but there ain't many guys between those two guys. Like if you're looking at, sort of the measurables from tight ends since that time, Sadiq is going to be way, way up there.
So we're coming up here on our second of 3 picks here. Kristen Miller goes off the board. Jets take Joshua Josephs. And for you here, as we approach this, now just 1 pick away as Caleb Lamu goes off. What's the position you think you want to attack as the Vikings here at pick 43 with 46, just a few picks after?
Yeah, we're going to consider safety. Certainly, we'll kick the tires on tight end. I don't know if any center in the class it would be worthy of this pick, but we can take a look there. Running back, linebacker would be the 2 other I'd be interested in looking at.
Okay, so there is. Let's see here. In terms of running back here, we've got Jonah Coleman, Jadarian Price, Nicholas Singleton, and I think that's maybe a little.
Yeah, Jonah Coleman would be a possibility. I do like Jonah Coleman's game. Like the best version of Jonah. He's. I don't want to say he's completely like this guy, but this is, maybe 90% version is Maurice Jones-Drew. It's the same thing of like a guy who was like, his body was built like in a trash compactor, and he's like built so low to the ground, and he's just muscled up beyond belief.
Okay.
And he has agility as well. So it's really hard to hit him flush because of that. He's just it's like a spinning bowling ball, but it's like it's been thrown at you like 100-mile-per-hour fastball, because if you can't then get him flush, he's going to blast through your shoulder pad on an off-angle attempt, because he big time power in his trunk as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a guy that can handle receiving volume as well, and it's a guy who's one of the better pass blockers in the class as well, which might appeal to the Vikings at this point, especially in a world where perhaps CJ Ham is not back next year, and of course you're receiving back this year, Aaron Jones. We've already released him for this exercise, so that would be a possibility. You toss up the tight ends there, AJ.
Yeah, so this is the tight ends and running backs here. So Max Clare, you got Jack Andrews, Michael Trigg, Eli Stowers.
We're going to pass on tight end here. I don't like any of those guys for this range.
Right. What other positions do you want me to pull up here?
Other ones, safety, center, and linebacker.
Perfect. Linebacker and...
Oh, we got some linebackers here. Yeah.
So CJ Allen, Anthony Hill Jr., AJ Halsey. Anybody here maybe jumping off the page?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with linebacker over Jonah Coleman with this one. But
Okay.
Both Allen and Anthony Hill, this would be a fascinating decision. They're not similar, but they're both really good SEC linebackers. CJ Allen is one of the best pure run defending linebackers that we've had coming into the draft the last couple of years. Awesome coming downhill, very good instincts. He can go sideline to sideline, and he is bringing it when he gets on the doorstep. One of those guys that wraps and drives through you, doesn't miss many tackles. He's fabulous at that. The downside of his evaluation is he is poor in coverage. It's one of those guys that at best you have to hide him there, or maybe even potentially get him off the field. It's an old school linebacker, but like a thoroughbred one, a really good sort of old school kind of guy. Anthony Hill is almost the opposite. Anthony Hill, it's this souped up athlete, that absolutely ludicrous athlete, and he's always around, seems to be around the ball, but you see missed tackles with Anthony Hill. There's still technique things. His instincts are not as good yet as Allen's. Anthony Hill has a higher ceiling than CJ Allen, but CJ Allen has a special power that he will bring to the NFL right away. AJ, I'm gonna roll the dice on upside here with Anthony Hill.
Okay.
Yeah, I get a little trepidation about the linebackers that can't cover. And so yeah, I'm gonna go with Hill here and hope the defensive staff can iron out some of the things, but he has everything that you would want physically.
All right, so we'll go Anthony Hill. 43rd pick. And then we have a very quick turnaround here as the Dolphins are going to select Mateo. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm going to let somebody else maybe guess on that one. CJ Allen goes to the Chiefs.
That's Mateo Uagalele. That's DJ's brother. DJ
Oh.
Uagalele's younger brother.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, he's defensive end. Yeah.
Well, CJ Allen, who seems like it was almost a coin toss in your mind, he goes 2 picks after Anthony Hill, but that brings us back here at the 46th pick, where
Sweet.
just so you're aware, the Patriots, I guess, would be interested in this, but that takes us out of the second round altogether.
Yeah, just for this exercise, we're gonna keep with this one so we can
Yeah.
do. Yeah. Let's toss up. We got to go. Let's see. Let's see what the ones we hadn't hit are
Safety, running back, tight end, maybe
tight end, and center. I think, or
Okay.
IOL. I think they have it on here.
Yeah. Perfect. So
Coleman's still in play for us.
Manuel Pregnan, Dylan Thieneman, and Kamari Ramsey, Connor Liu.
Connor Liu, I do not believe will be in this class because of an injury, and he's a true third-year guy.
Okay.
I think Connor Liu is going to return to college. We'll have to see on that. There's interesting safeties here for sure. Thieneman from Oregon is one of the better true center field safeties we're going to have in this class. He played down his second year in campus because Purdue tried to make him like a move piece guy. He ain't that. He's pure center field. When he has everything in front of him, he tends to make the right read. And it's not too dissimilar from Coy Parrish for Gopher fans out there. Of like when you have Coy back in center field, that's when you see the most flash plays from him. And when they get cute, sometimes he can get out of position. That beat Thieneman. Kamari Ramsey can do more things, certainly more versatile, but that doesn't have not quite as good coming from center field. But AJ, I think in this scenario, I love Jonah Coleman too much. People might be mad at me for a skew in safety here. I think you could do either one. Both, those guys I would view as instant starters with where we are right now. You could go with the Eneman and he would then replace Harry the Hitman. Jonah Coleman in this scenario, he's replacing Aaron Jones, and then you have Coleman and then Mason. Coleman would be able to stay on the field for all the passing downs. I mentioned he's a really good pass blocker and you can throw him the ball as well. Okay. But I think that would be a really interesting complement. And then you could still use Mason for the kind of grinding stuff and stuff like that. But the efficiency there and the reliability in the pass game as well, I think that plays up the running game quite a bit.
All right. So we're going to go Jonah Coleman here at pick 46. And then we'll kind of let this thing run out. And if you want me to stop and you want to do one last ditch, Hail Mary trying to get back into the second round, you just let me know. But Jacoby Lane goes, Caleb Tiernan goes. If you were to sit with this draft of through 2 rounds, Mansour Delane, Anthony Hill Jr., and Jonah Coleman, before we get the grade from PFF, what would you grade that?
I think that's solid work.
Okay.
Yeah, because you have 3 instant starters, right? You turn, a skip down in the first round that didn't matter to you. The same 2 prospects we were considering at 11 were on the board at 14, and you manufacture another second round pick that you turn into a starter. So coming out of those first 3 picks with 3 guys that we know are going to be day 1 starters, I think super beneficial here.
All right, so here it comes, and I was actually wrong. I did math wrong as a St. Cloud guy, believe it or not. But here we go. So from PFF, they give us a B+ on the Mansour Delane pick, a C- on the Anthony Hill Jr., and a C on Jonah Coleman.
Yeah, they're upset. I didn't take I didn't take CJ Allen because they have him ranked higher.
But that's a B-. I mean, honestly, if that was a real life draft grade for Kwesi, I think most people would take that given some of the most recent draft stuff. But through 2 rounds, are you satisfied with making that trade to acquire a second round pick and then coming away with these 3 guys?
I am. Yeah. I think when we get to April, those 3 guys, I think there's a really solid shot that all 3 of them end up going higher than where we took them. Of course, the PFF grading methodology, they're going to nick us because they say at the time we took the second best linebacker on the board. I certainly have different opinions on that. And then
Mm-hmm.
Jonah Coleman, again, we could have taken the safety there, but in the scenario where you've cut Aaron Jones, and they might have dinged us too, because PFF says running back's not a need, I would assume, but right now, but it will be obviously a big one if you cut Aaron Jones. So bringing Jonah Coleman in, and I think Jonah Coleman a good fit too. Again, thinking about the thing of like, if Jones is gone and CJ Ham is gone, you absolutely, it's not just that you have a need in the backfield. You must acquire someone that can be on the field that can pass protect as well. And Jonah Coleman is a really, really good pass pro running back as well. So that would be a big check in his box.
All right. Well, hey, I think that was for a first mock draft, only 2 rounds, about as good as it could have gone. And really quick, before I know we're going to wrap up here, but for the audience, tomorrow is a Thursday edition of Thor Talks Purple. And that's going to mean it's Ask Thor Anything Thursday. So if you have questions for Thor, leave it in the comment section below. I'll be kind of scouring those throughout the day and in the coming weeks as well. And I'll throw some stuff at Thor from you, the listener, whether you're audio only or on YouTube. Get in the YouTube comments and let us know so we can ask Thor whatever you want.
And that's a wrap on today's episode with that. Please click the like as well when you're down there. Please click the subscribe and please give us a 5-star review. One of the episodes coming up, anyone that has given us a 5-star review and has written a review in there, I'll shout some of you guys out. So please do that for us with the new channel. It would really help out.